Welcome back to Iraqi Dinar, your trusted place for real talk, straight updates, and honest breakdowns about what's happening inside Iraq's financial system and what it truly means for you as a holder. Today's warning is not just urgent, it's something every dinar holder needs to hear with full attention. We're diving straight into the headline. Warning to dinar holders, your 25,000 note may soon be worth only 25. And I know, just hearing that sends a wave of confusion, frustration, and maybe even fear. But stay with me, because once you understand the difference between an exchange rate and a nominal rate, everything becomes stunningly clear. What's coming isn't random. It's a structured possibility tied directly to redenomination. And once those zeros are removed officially, the number printed on your note stops reflecting the value you expected. So let's break this down in real-world terms, step by step, without hype and without sugar-coating. A lot of people misunderstand something extremely important. The exchange rate and the nominal value of a note are two very different things. When Iraq talks about deleting the zeros, they are not magically increasing your purchasing power. They are adjusting the currency structure. That means your big note, that 25,000 dinar bill you're proudly holding, could become equivalent to a 25 dinar note under the new system. Not less value, but less zeros. And when you walk into an exchange center, they are not going to play pretend. They're going to look at your 25,000 note and tell you, this is no longer 25,000. After redenomination, this note is worth 25. And once that happens, every exchange office around the world follows the same rule automatically. Because they don't operate on emotion, speculation, or rumor. They operate strictly on what the issuing central bank declares. Now imagine this. You're heading into your exchange appointment thinking you're holding a high-value note, expecting some giant return. But the teller looks at your currency, enters the new redenominated value into their system, and the screen shows 25 IQD. Imagine the shock. Imagine the frustration. Imagine that sinking feeling that nobody warned you what was really happening behind the scenes. That is exactly why this message matters. Once a redenomination takes place, the zeros on the notes are functionally gone in every global banking system. You can't argue it, you can't negotiate it, and no exchange center will override it. Because at that moment, compliance takes over. Not rumor-based RV dreams. Not overnight miracles. Cold, straightforward monetary policy. And here's the part many people don't want to hear, but need to hear. When a country redenominates its currency, the goal is not to make people rich. The goal is to simplify accounting, stabilize inflation visuals, and reset the pricing system. That's what Turkey did. That's what Brazil did. That's what many countries have done in the past. And in every example, large notes became small on paper. 1,000,000 became 1,000. 1,000 became 1. And life moved on. People didn't cash out for massive profit, they simply adjusted. So if Iraq goes forward with deleting the zeros, your 25,000 note doesn't suddenly turn into thousands of dollars. It turns into exactly 25 units under the new system. Because that's how redenomination works universally, whether you're in Baghdad, New York, Dubai, or London. But let's talk about why this matters right now. Iraq has openly discussed the project to delete the zeros many times. It's not a secret. It's part of monetary reform. And every time the central bank brings it up again, it signals they're preparing for restructuring rather than a sudden rocket-style revaluation. When the CBI says they want to adjust the nominal structure, this doesn't mean the value jumps. It means the numbers change. And I know a lot of people confuse these terms because online intel mixes them together, creating hope and hype instead of understanding. But when the banking system talks, it uses precise language. Exchange rate is the real value. Nominal rate is the printed number. They are not the same and never will be. Now imagine the scenario again. You walk into an exchange location after the redenomination. You hand over your 25,000 note. The worker scans it or enters the code. The system automatically recalculates it based on the redenominated rate, not the old printed face value. And suddenly, that note you thought would change your life is not 25,000 anymore. It is simply 25 IQD. No bank employee will look at you and say, "Oh, you missed the old system. Let me give you the old value." It does not work that way. Once the zeros are dropped, they are dropped everywhere. The exchange world doesn't negotiate with nostalgia. And let's talk emotionally for a moment, because many people have put their hopes, dreams, and future plans into these notes. Some bought them years ago. Some stacked them believing an RV would turn them into millionaires. Some were told that one day, one 25,000 note could equal tens of thousands of dollars. And I get it. That dream feels good. But what feels even better is the truth, the clarity, and the ability to prepare instead of being blindsided. Being informed is not losing. Being informed is winning before the moment arrives. The possibility of your note becoming a 25 unit note doesn't mean the currency itself becomes worthless. It just means the physical number printed on the note changes under the policy. Prices in Iraq would shift to, instead of an item costing 25,000 dinars, it would cost 25 dinars under the new system. So the purchasing power remains the same. Nothing magical, nothing devastating, just numerical restructuring. But for holders outside Iraq who are expecting profit, that's where the shock comes. Because you weren't holding the currency for everyday shopping, you were holding it for gains. And redenomination is not designed for gains. Let me give you another example. If a country has 10,000 to 1 inflation historically and removes for zeros, a 10,000 note becomes a 1-unit note. That doesn't mean the value went down. It means the accounting became cleaner. If Iraq follows this path, your 25,000 note fits that same pattern. It becomes the equivalent of a smaller note under the new structure. So while people online may promise skyrocketing values, banks and governments don't make policies based on rumor. They make policies based on stability. Another thing people forget is this. Banks around the world don't go hunting for opportunities to give you massive returns. They operate strictly by international compliance rules. If Iraq officially redenominates, every banking system globally updates their systems instantly. That means whether you're in Canada, Pakistan, Germany, or the US, your 25,000 note becomes the redenominated value in every database, on every screen, in every teller's system, instantly and automatically. That's why understanding the difference between exchange rate and nominal rate is unbelievably important. One affects value, one affects the printed number, and redenomination targets the printed number, not the global value. So when people ask, will I get rich? The real question is, what policy is Iraq planning to implement? If it's redenomination, then no. If it's revaluation, a real rate change, that's a different story. But historically, governments announce redenomination far more often than a huge RV is rare. A redenomination is common. When Iraq mentions deleting zeros, they're referencing something that fits the common pattern, a systematic adjustment, not a wealth event. Now let's talk about the psychological impact. Many dinar holders avoid this topic because it clashes with the dream they've been told for years. But being aware empowers you. It puts you in a position to make logical decisions instead of emotional ones. When you understand what redenomination does, you stop imagining massive payouts and start focusing on what the central bank is really saying. You start reading official terminology the right way. And most importantly, you avoid being caught off guard. Imagine the moment Iraq announces the project formally. Within seconds, the news spreads. Within minutes, currency dealers adjust their pricing. Within hours, exchange centers update their systems. And within a day, every bank worldwide recalculates the value of your notes. No warnings, no delays, no last-minute opportunities. It happens instantly. That's why learning this now is not just helpful, it's crucial. But let's also be fair. Iraq could still take a different path. They could decide to adjust the exchange rate upward for stability. They could push monetary reform in stages. They could use redenomination later instead of sooner. No one knows the timing except the central bank. But every time they mention deleting zeros, that's a direct alarm bell for anyone holding stacked notes expecting windfall returns. The wording never means your wealth is coming. It means your note size may be shrinking. You also need to see how global markets react to currency restructuring. Investors don't panic. They simply adapt. But retail holders, everyday people, often react emotionally because they're not used to seeing zeros disappear. And that's why so many get confused between redenomination and devaluation. Removing zeros is not devaluing. It's But if you bought those notes for profit, both outcomes feel the same to you because your expected return shrinks. Now consider this. If Iraq redenominates, the new notes circulate alongside old ones for a transitional period. That means even if you're holding a 25,000 note, its value is calculated as the newer 25-unit equivalent. Exchange centers aren't going to say, oh, you have the old version, let's treat it differently. The system doesn't care which version you hold. It cares only about the current official structure. The biggest misconception is thinking that deleting zeros magically increases the value. It doesn't. It simply shortens the number. And unless Iraq also increases the exchange rate, which is a separate event entirely, your purchasing power remains identical. Many countries removed zeros, but almost none experienced a massive RV afterward. The redenomination itself is usually the end result of stability and long-term inflation control. Now, here's the real reason people need to listen. If you have friends, family, community members, or groups invested heavily in and they don't understand redenomination, they may walk straight into disappointment without knowing what hit them. They may think banks are cheating them. They may think someone stole their opportunity. But the truth is simple. The policy would have worked exactly as designed, exactly as explained, and exactly as historically proven. As we continue breaking this down, remember, the central bank will always use technical language that sounds neutral, adjusting the nominal structure, deleting zeros, introducing lower denominations. These are signals of redenomination, not revaluation. A revaluation uses completely different language, like strengthening the exchange rate or increasing purchasing power. Iraq has mentioned both in different contexts. but deleting zeros is always tied to structure, not wealth generation. Now, picture the moment you hand your note to a teller. The scanner reads the note. The system shows the redenominated value. You're standing there, shocked, maybe frustrated, maybe angry, but the teller can't change anything. Banks follow policy, not personal expectations. And that's why being informed gives you control long before that moment happens. You won't walk in confused. You won't be surprised. You'll know exactly what to expect. The emotional weight of this topic is heavy because the dinar investment world has been filled with hype for more than a decade. People were promised life-changing returns. People were told governments around the world were waiting to flip a switch, but the central bank has never said anything close to that. What they have said repeatedly is that they want to modernize their currency and delete zeros, a phrase that directly warns holders what could come next. Understanding all of this doesn't mean losing hope. It means gaining clarity. Iraq could still strengthen its exchange rate long-term. Iraq could still grow economically. Iraq could still raise its currency slowly, realistically, and sustainably through reforms. But none of that involves a magical overnight lottery event. Real monetary reform is gradual, structured, and carefully controlled. And the final point is this: when you know the truth, you can protect yourself. You can make reasonable expectations. You can focus on facts instead of fantasies. And you can avoid being blindsided by policy changes that affect millions of holders around the world. That is why today's warning matters more than ever. Not to scare you, but to prepare you. Not to crush hope, but to replace confusion with understanding. And with that, stay informed, stay aware, and always research official statements, not online rumors. Your financial future deserves clarity, not confusion.